Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's discussion on intellectual property and how you can protect your assets from being poached by bad actors, both domestic and international, trying to poach your trade secrets. The thousands of daily cyber attacks against academic institutions, business and industry, and government severely undermines our nation's economic and national security. This topic has gained greater significance as the attacks have become even more sophisticated than before. This comes from someone who has been on the receiving end of phone and computer network intrusions. Despite this being April Fool's Day, this topic is hardly a joke. With me today is Bill Honecker, member of the law firm Dickinson Wright, headquartered in Detroit. Before we get to you, Bill, and by way of introduction, my name is Noel Nefscher. I'm Director of International Business Services and Global Strategic Partnerships for Automation Alley in Troy, Michigan. Created in 1999, Automation Alley is Michigan's Industry 4.0 Knowledge Center with more than 1,400 members. My roles and responsibilities include helping companies do business overseas and also to assist foreign companies set up their operations here in Michigan. William, it's a pleasure to talk to you again, and thank you for being with us today. I thought we would go ahead and start by having you introduce yourself to our audience and also provide a quick overview of your recently published book. By the way, a well-written book, I might add, entitled A Business Owner's Guide to Intellectual Property, Turn Your Ideas into Gold. When we spoke last week, you mentioned that the U.S. is falling behind in IP protection. And so you rightly point out that business owners tend to view IP as an afterthought. While companies know it's important, there are misconceptions and misunderstandings and a lot of confusion surrounding that. So I sort of set things up. Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you could just introduce yourself. And I'm always interested in how people get interested or pursue these types of issues. So when you were a law student, did you know that this was like an area you were interested in going in, or was it just something that over time you developed an interest in and became an expert in? So Bill, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Noel. Thanks for inviting me.
Our pleasure.
I went to engineering school, which is usually a prerequisite to being a patent attorney. Frankly, had no interest in being a patent attorney, didn't even know what an intellectual property lawyer was, much less a patent lawyer. And my senior year, one of my study partners was going to go into law and be an intellectual property lawyer. And I got to looking into it. It seemed like a good fit, and I've been there over the last 35 plus years. So it's challenging. It's interesting. You get to deal with very creative people every day. So I've loved every minute of it.
Oh, that's for sure. It's always interesting to hear how people started their career. And sometimes it's just serendipitous, and other times you just never know where it's going to take you. So, making the mental leap from engineering school to law is a real interesting one.
Yeah, I'd always wanted to go to law school. Sure. Like I said, I went to engineering school because I was good in math and science and had an interest in it, but my true intent was to go to law school. And then when I was in law school, I had the opportunity to have a practicing attorney, an intellectual property attorney, teach a class. And he suggested I go to the patent office to learn patent law. So I left the University of Toledo. I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio. Went to Georgetown University Law School and worked at the patent office as an examiner. And then that's where my initial training was in intellectual property, and then continued on my entire career in it.
Interesting. Geez. And, of course, we now have that USPTO office, U.S. Patent and Trademark office located in downtown Detroit. So yes. You still have interactions with some of the people you knew back in Washington?
I do from time to time. We interact with the Patent and Trademark office almost every day. Interestingly, when I was an examiner, the only place you could be an examiner was in Washington, not Washington, D.C., but in Virginia. Right. At the time, it was Arlington, then it moved to Alexandria. And I just heard recently they're going to possibly close down that office and then just have the regional offices. So, and that's a sign of the times where examiners, when I was an examiner, I had to go to work every day. Now examiners work from home. So it's just
That's
part of
true.
technology and the way
Yeah.
things are going.
But I think, when the USPTO moved to Detroit, I think that sort of underscored the extent to which Detroit and Michigan is really a high-tech mecca and a center of innovation, with all the patents and innovations coming out of this region. So it was really, a good decision for them to move here. We've had some interactions with them, and they've really helped a lot with a lot of our members that are doing business overseas. So, Bill, in the 15 minutes that we have today, I'd like to begin by asking you why business owners should be interested in IP.
The main reason business owners should be interested in intellectual property is that it's never been more valuable than it is today. You'll read articles. There's a recent Forbes article that commented on the fact that intellectual property is now as high as 80% of a company's balance sheet. Most financial experts will say a well-managed intellectual property portfolio is at least a third of the total asset value of a business. So it's a huge asset. Every business has intellectual property. And as you mentioned in the introduction, most businesses treat it as an afterthought. And that's what prompted me, quite frankly, to start speaking nationally, because as a patent lawyer, or as an intellectual property lawyer, you're assuming everybody is paying attention to this asset. And when you get out and talk to business owners, they've got a lot of other things to be thinking about, and it tends to fall to the wayside. And then it's not an issue until it's a real problem.
When I started my career around 30 years ago with the Detroit Regional Chamber, we were helping companies do business overseas. So there was this one automotive company I can't name, but nevertheless, they were from outside Ann Arbor. They set up their operations in China at the invitation of the Chinese government, and were working side by side with a state-owned company, only to find that a year or two later, after they established their operations outside of Shanghai, that People's Plant number 667 opened up down the street. We're making the exact same product as this automotive supplier was. Basically drove them out of business and almost caused them to go bankrupt here in the United States. So it's just such a critical issue. But you're right. I know a lot of times we do trade missions overseas, and people are so lathered up, about getting the sale and not thinking about protecting their trade secrets, IP included. So that said, what are the major types of intellectual property, and what makes them valuable?
Trade secrets is one, and every business has trade secrets. Those are things that are valuable to your business that you can keep a secret. So every business has them. The other major intellectual property categories are patents, which typically protect inventions. Trademarks, again, every company has them, and that's your brand. Think of Nike or even the swoosh logo. Those are trademarks. And then one that's often forgotten but can be very valuable are copyrights. Most people think of those as protecting books or music, but copyrights protect the expression of any idea in tangible form, which means if you can reproduce it, it's likely to be capable of copyright protection. So for businesses, it can be websites, content, images on the website, and the copyright laws can be pretty tough on infringers. So it's one not to be forgotten about.
Right.
And the value comes in. I can quickly, if you don't mind, shift to a quick slide.
Sure.
There's really 5 major IP drivers. Intellectual property gives you the right to prevent others from infringing. So that can result in higher selling price. If you've got a product or service and you're the only one that can provide it, you can demand a higher price. Same argument applies with regard to protecting market share. Additional revenue streams, you can license your intellectual property, you can sell it. Many companies make handsome incomes based upon the licensing of their intellectual property. Protect your business reputation. You don't want to be confused with somebody, particularly if they're not doing a good job. And then lastly, as we talked about, just overall greater business value.
Great slide. All right. So I guess the next logical question is, what businesses need to know about international IP protection. And if I could follow up with that to ask that, again, I don't mean to pick on China, but once again, there was a incident where one of our members had an issue with intellectual property, so they went to litigate it in a Chinese court. Well, unfortunately, when there is the dispute between a U.S. and American company when they have operations in China, it has to be adjudicated by a local court, so they lose home field advantage. And there's also different interpretations of IP protection, between China and the United States. So again, what should business owners know about IP protection? Most importantly.
Yeah, there's two main things to understand. Number one, with regard to patents, if you want protection in other countries, as you indicated, for example, China, you ultimately have to get patent protection in that country. And there's international treaties that make it easier, less expensive to get protection in other countries. But one of the things you always should be thinking about as a business owner, where am I taking this? Where do I have existing markets? Where might I have markets? And then also be thinking about where might this product be counterfeited or knocked off, or something that I don't want to have happen, and look at getting patent protection in those countries. Another big area of concern for most businesses, especially those looking to go to other countries for business, and that's, most businesses today are looking to be global, and that's in the trademark area. In the US, you get trademark rights when you use a trademark, but a lot of other countries, the majority of them, only give you trademark rights if you file. It's sort of not the same, but it's similar to getting a domain name. So we see a lot of businesses getting their trademarks hijacked in countries that they might be thinking of expanding into, and then we're forced to either litigate to get them back or pay a ransom to get our own trademarks back. And we've even seen it in situations where we've used distributors, where the distributor will go and register our trademarks, and at the time probably trying to help out. But when it comes time to sell the business or change distributors, then you've got the distributor owning your rights, and you have to negotiate to get your trademarks back. So the key in the way to safeguard that is get your registrations in other countries before you start expanding into those other countries, just to protect yourself.
Sure. One of the, speaking of the trade missions that we've done, the last one we did before COVID was to India. And so whenever we go in country, we always meet with the local embassy folks from the U.S. Commercial Service or the U.S. State Department, and they talk about, not just the opportunities, but the challenges of doing business in country. And this particular gentleman is brilliant. And he was also, he wasn't an attorney, but he was an expert in intellectual property protection. And he gave probably the best advice that you could give to any company on how to outfox the cyber thieves or the people that are smashing and grabbing your intellectual property. He said, with the quick pace of technology and in turn innovation, the best way to stay ahead of the cyber thieves is out innovate them. And technology has allowed us to do that because, if you recall, just look at a car. I remember back in the day, even in the 1990s, what would it take automotive companies like, 5 or 6 years from concept to actually rolling a vehicle off the production line? And now it's down to 12 months. And that also applies to other sophisticated technologies and products that are out there. You just have to continually out innovate them. And the company that does it the best, at least in my view, is Apple. So, but what are your thoughts on that? I mean,
Well, and I agree with that. If you can out innovate, I agree. I think as you're innovating, you need to protect what you're innovating to the best you can, and not just give away some of your great products. That you've got your products and you've got your better editions of those products. Well, you might as well protect the stream. The one thing that comes to play in that innovation area, and I see this a lot in practice, and that's the other side of intellectual property, and that's when you potentially get yourself into an infringement issue, because you can innocently infringe intellectual property. There doesn't have to be an intent there. So in fact, I'm dealing with a company right now. For 5 years, they've been revolutionizing this industry, finally got this product to launch, and then within weeks, they're facing a patent lawsuit because nobody looked to see if somebody else might have some intellectual property. So even though if you're innovating, you need to be aware of what your competition's doing and what the intellectual property landscape looks like.
So you anticipated my next question. So why businesses need to be concerned about IP infringement?
They need to be concerned, as I indicated. You can infringe someone's patent and not even know the patent's in existence.
Exactly.
That happens a lot.
I agree.
So you need to be looking at the minefield of intellectual property as you develop technology. And that one quick way to do that is keep track of what your competition's doing in the way of intellectual property. Another area where, and this is an area that is growing in the sense of it being a problem, and that's copyright infringement, where companies are clipping and pasting images off the internet. They're doing it innocently, thinking they can do that, and they can't. Well, there's entire businesses now who search the internet 24/7 for infringers with reverse image searching, and they send out letters demanding very, very high damages for copyright infringement. And there's not a lot of defense if you cut and paste it. It's just a negotiation at that point. So you can get into trouble that way. Theft of trade secrets, not knowing that you've hired an employee who showed up with technology innovation from his last employer. Nobody intended to take anything, but all of a sudden you have a very creative new engineer, and then you find out you're in the potential for a theft of trade secret lawsuit because that engineer brought technology with him or ideas from his former employer.
That's right.
And it happens to everyone. I found it interesting. Just recently, I read an article. Tesla, you would think, is at the top of their game with regard to trade secrets. They hired an engineer between Christmas and New Year's. Within a week, they marched him out of the building because he had uploaded, I think it was 25,000 pages of technology that Tesla was working on to his Dropbox account. So, it's a problem. You have to be careful, not just legally, but just technology-wise. They caught it, but it was surprising it could even happen to a company like that.
Oh, yeah. So did he have nefarious intentions? Was he going to shop
He said it was an accident. That he was just trying to back things up.
I mean, the bane of a lot of these companies' existence are the flash drives, and how they download their all their information, and they take it overseas, and next thing you know, that flash drive goes missing. I mean, we always tell people whenever we go overseas to just leave their computers at home, and don't bring any flash drives, and certainly don't don't accept any flash drives that can contain potential malware, and not only get into your computer, but leapfrog, into your network back home. So is there a system that helps business owners protect their IP and protect their business from infringement
Yeah,
of other IPs?
yeah, I have a system I've used now for probably the last 30 years. It's very effective. I mean, businesses have systems for everything. What they
Sure.
don't have, most businesses, many do, but most don't have a system for intellectual property they're developing and avoiding intellectual property lawsuits. And what I've developed, I call it the recipe for success. It's RCP. It's 3 steps. And the first is to recognize the business has intellectual property. And what we're talking about today are the types of things that, at a 40,000-foot level, you've got at least trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets, maybe patents, depending on the company. And then you train your people to collect that intellectual property. And you train them by having them ask 2 simple questions. One is it important to the business? And if the answer is yes, the second question is, do you want your competition not to have it? And if that's yes, then it's probably protectable intellectual property. And then the third step, the P, is protect, and that's where you meet with your intellectual property counsel, usually quarterly for about an hour. You go through all of your existing intellectual property, all of the intellectual property you've collected, and then you discuss all the products that you're thinking about launching or even services, so that you can quickly determine whether there needs to be an investigation to see if those might be potential for infringement charges. So when you do it, when you keep it at an hour or less, and you set these dates up quarterly, all of a sudden intellectual property is in the forefront for your business, and everything's protected. And just as importantly, you're never surprised by an IP lawsuit ever.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also nice to know that, there's not just organizations like yours, but even, the FBI, they have a cyber unit in their Detroit field office, and they're willing to work with any company or meet with any company to talk about cyber defenses. So to me, there's really no excuse when there's expertise out there from Dickinson Wright and the FBI for these companies to remain vulnerable to to any kind of attack. And your point about Tesla, I'd love to circle back to that just for a moment, because it triggered a thought. A lot of times, and you probably seen this, but tell me if you agree with this. I've noticed that a lot of companies are so concerned about protecting the perimeter of their intellectual property and trade secrets that they forget about the most important threat vector, which is internal. It's their employees that are stealing from them, unfortunately. It's no different from a retail store where most theft is employee. It's inside, it's employee theft. Do you find that sometimes with, obviously Tesla, triggered that thought for me, but do you find that a lot, that companies, their employees will sometimes steal their technology and then shop it to their next employer?
Yeah, actually, the majority of theft of trade secret cases I've seen in my career are employees who are leaving either to go to a competitor or to go and start their own business. Now, I believe of those, a fair majority of those are not employees trying to do something nefarious. It's more innocent infringement. They don't understand this is important. And what I advise clients to do is to put a paragraph in their employment agreements regarding trade secrets, and then have an exit interview and make it known to the employee that there are trade, you don't have to identify them, but there are trade secrets in this business, and you've agreed not to disclose them. And if you do, we're going to have to take action. And then have the same type of discussion with employees coming into your business that
Right.
we really don't want to get sued for theft of trade secrets, so we don't want anything from your previous employer. I just had, and you can make that even more forceful by when employees leave. And this just happened to a client of mine who hired 2 engineers. The company that they left sent the employees and their new employer, my client, a letter saying they've signed this agreement. Here's the paragraphs. They have been exposed to trade secrets. We don't want you taking those trade secrets, and we're going to be watching and have to take action. It was a very nice letter, but what it triggered was in my client calling me and saying, do I have a problem? What do I need to do? I don't want, and then we walked through what to do with their new hires. So
Yeah.
it's a preventive step that I think is extremely effective, because a lot of this is innocent takings.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, these engineers, they gain knowledge. They're looking for the next rung in the ladder. Whether it's higher pay, better benefits, or hours, and it's just kind of they have this intuitive knowledge, but they really have to think real hard about what they do and what they say, because engineers by their very nature, they like to brag, and for good reason too. They're the most interesting people I know. But you're right. A lot of this is innocent, but you just have to be aware. So
Yeah.
hence the NDAs and the non-compete agreements and the other things that companies put in place, and rightly so. So, we just have 2 minutes to go here, Bill. So I want to give it to you. What are your final thoughts, or the most important things you want to say, just so you're on message before we conclude the interview? What do you think the audience needs to know? Whether you need to reiterate what you've already said, or if there's anything else that would be of interest to them.
Well, I think the one thing that every business needs to appreciate is that they have intellectual property and it's valuable. And they need to really pay attention to that. They need to put in some type of a system so that it continually is reviewed and discussed within the organization, because it's valuable now. I think it's going to get even more valuable. I think depending on where the economy goes historically, when the economy is bad, that's when companies tend to quit developing or slow down development. But then they begin to look at their intellectual property portfolio and try and use that to maintain their markets and maintain their business through infringements and litigation. So by being aware of it on a regular basis, continually monitoring it, I think you'll grow your value in your business, while at the same time making sure your business isn't completely distracted by unnecessary litigation. And it's going to keep growing. It's going to be more important tomorrow than it is today.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, this isn't a static issue. And as I alluded to earlier, I mean, the attacks are getting more and more sophisticated, especially, with the digitalization of the economy. And, I mean, I know I mentioned the Chinese, but you have the Russians, you have the North Koreans, you have all these other nation states that are looking, to steal U.S. technology. And it is amazing how many attacks we get today. It's thousands of attacks, not just on business and industry, but academia and government institutions, because they realize we're the most innovative country in the world. And so if you're looking to to improve your economy in these countries, best way to do it is try to steal it, because China made a decision very early that why would we want to spend billions and billions you know, basic or applied research and development when we could get it by hook or crook. And whether that's by, you know, inviting Western companies to set up their operations in China, with the provision that they had to partner up with a state-owned Chinese company who eventually steals their intellectual property. You know, I mean, there's just so many things that, you know, people need to be aware of. But Americans, you know, we're very trusting, and we're easy to social engineer. So I always tell people that they just need to be very, very careful, and yeah, go ahead and trust, but always verify who you're doing business with, you know, whether that's international or domestic. So anyway, well, Bill, thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to talking to you again down the road. This has really been, you know, a great discussion for us, and we appreciate you sharing your firsthand insights and knowledge, not only about the problem, but solutions to it that companies can apply immediately. If people want to get a hold of you to ask follow-up questions from this interview, how do they do so? Call you? Could you give us your email? What?
Yeah, you can call me. Best way to reach me is by phone or email, but phone is 248-318-7015. That's my cell phone. My email address is whonecker@dickinsonwright.com, and you can reach me there. I've got a slide I can put up with that information.
Oh yeah, please. Definitely.
I believe it can. There we go.
Perfect. Great.
Yeah, and that number there happens to be, the phone number is my office number, 248-433-7381. That's my office number. So love to answer questions, love to be of help. Give me a call and I'll sit down with you and talk intellectual property.
Yeah, well, next time we, you know, we reach out to you, we're hoping that, you know, the storm clouds have gone away. I mean, the pandemic storm clouds, and you can actually come to Automation Alley and meet face to face with our member companies, because again, this is really a very important issue to them. And they, you know, like I said, I mean, this threat is going to get worse before it gets better, and they need to be aware of you know, what the current and future threats are, so this way they can protect themselves accordingly. So, Bill, thank you again. Happy Easter to you and your family. Great seeing you, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Noel. Appreciate it very much.
Take care.
Have
Likewise.
a great day.